Hello and welcome to the CPA Accreditation Panel's webinar on being an effective site visitor. This webinar is intended as a refresher on site visit roles, responsibilities, and procedures in the wake not only of updated procedures from the Accreditation Office and panel, but also in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the plan today is to go over a little bit of accreditation process, including the site visitor procedures review, spend a little bit of time going back over the roles and responsibilities of site visitors, including some updated guidelines around site visitor conflict of interest, speaking a little bit about guidelines for site visit planning and report writing, and then spending a little bit of time talking about some changes related to virtual site visits. So in the past 5 years, there have been some updates made to the accreditation processes. In particular, there have been updates made since the last revision of the standards. These changes have primarily revolved around the authorization and site visit scheduling process, as well as the process for self-study submission timelines. So I'm just going quickly over some of the procedure outline here, and what I'm going to do is I'm also going to include a copy of this PowerPoint presentation so that people can review these process trees a little bit more in depth. But in terms of the scheduling, as opposed to the scheduling being done by the programs a number of years ago, probably around 5 or 6 years ago, as at the time of recording, the Accreditation Office took over scheduling for accreditation and reaccreditation site visits, meaning that programs don't select their own site visit teams. They don't select their own, they don't go from a master list. The Accreditation Office essentially curates a list of site visitors, taking into account some, some regional concerns for site visit team composition, as well as doing a first pass for conflict of interest. And then once the Accreditation Office has done that, that curated list is forwarded to the program, and the program is asked for a list of dates, at which point the site visitors are polled and on those list of dates for availability, and the team is composed of one chair and either one or two other members, and that team is put together by the Accreditation Office. Another major change that has occurred in the last 5 years or the last, 6 years, is the inclusion of self-study submission deadlines for programs. One of the problems that was noted by the Accreditation Office is that programs were very typically scheduling site visits around a particular period of the year, which led to a very large imbalance in the number of reviews that was being done by the panel at, for example, their fall meeting versus their spring meeting. It was also leading to a lot of strain on the availability of site visitors, given the fact that we have a limited roster. And so what the Accreditation Office has done and the Accreditation Panel has since put into procedure is that we now have 3 self-study submission periods, one in the spring for site visits in the fall, one in the fall for site visits in the winter, and one in the winter for site visits in the spring or summer. And this has allowed us to balance the number of site visits that are being done at any one time so that we can have a more manageable workload, not only for panel reviewers, but also for the limited number of site visitors we have. Another change that has occurred in the last couple of years now is that the procedures have been separated from the standards and are now their own document. The standards themselves, being community standards, are going to be subject to the same revision process as they always have, that will involve multiple rounds of public consultation, but the procedures being something that sometimes require a little bit more fluidity, were seen to be potentially requiring updates more often than the standards themselves. And so as such, they have been separated into two documents, and I've provided a link here for the document for the new procedures to be able to be reviewed at your leisure. Another change that's occurred in the last 5 years is that the term for CPA APA joint accreditation has officially lapsed. As of 2015, the APA no longer accredits in Canada, and the CPA, though we had never accredited in the United States, no longer have that option either. Instead, the CPA and the APA have signed the First Street Accord, which is a mutual monitoring and a mutual recognition agreement. And if you'd like more information about that or to read the content of the accord, you can go to the link provided here. So we've already gone over a little bit of this, but in terms of site visitor selection and site visitor team preparation, these are the basic steps that the accreditation office and the programs go through. So the accreditation office sends that curated list of potential visitors and asks the program for a list of potential dates, typically 3 or 4 date pairs at a minimum. Once the program has vetted the list for conflict of interest, the accreditation office polls the visitors on that vetted list for their availability. Once a team is selected based on availability and composition, the director of training of the program sends the self-study to each visitor along with an invitation to participate in a site visit. The CPA office provides other information about the program. So, for example, past reaffirmation letters, questions from panel reviewer, and the accreditation history. The site visitors then familiarize themselves with the standards and procedures, the self-study, the reaffirmation letters, the specific questions from the reviewer, and they formulate questions and items for clarification or elaboration to be posed to the different stakeholder groups during the site visit, and then the site visit proceeds. In particular, it's to be noted that the chair's role in this case really revolves around confirming the site visit schedule with the director of training, and that is something that can be negotiated, assigning tasks to site visit team members, and ultimately ensuring the submission of the report to the accreditation office within 30 days of the completion of the visit. In terms of the roles and responsibilities of site visitors, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the general purpose of site visits. Although this is something that is relatively familiar for a lot of our more veteran site visitors, a little bit of a reminder is sometimes helpful, particularly if you've only done 1 or 2 visits. The purpose of visits is really to assess how compliant a particular program is with accreditation standards and procedures. And it's there to basically supplement or enhance the information provided in the self-study. Each program is going to be different. We have over 80 accredited programs across doctoral and internship programs in the country, and each one of them is going to have its own philosophy, its own goals, its own objectives, its own outcomes. And as long as those adhere to the standards, what we're really trying to figure out is how the program does what they are doing within their own framework and within their own, their own philosophy. As I mentioned, it's here to supplement the information presented in the self-study. So the site visit team is really there to report on aspects of the program that are less clear or that might not be as clear or visible on paper. So, for example, things like, the atmosphere of collegiality within a program, respect among faculty members and students, review of student files, review of the campus, the actual facilities, those kinds of things that are really not things that you can generally capture when you're reviewing a self-study document. Site visitors are primarily performing site visits to act as basically the eyes and ears of the panel. They're there to act as representatives, not necessarily as decision makers. And so the primary function of the site visit team is really to collect on-site data to enhance and verify the self-study. The responsibility of the site visit team ends with the submission of the site visit report. So there's no other contact with the program until after the panel has made their decision. And I have a note here. It is really important to remember that the feedback that's provided to the program should really be limited to the intended contents of the site visit report. Site visitors should not be guaranteeing that a program is going to be accredited, should not be making any mention of the accreditation status of the program, not making comments on terms of accreditation or anything else along those lines. It's really just about what you have found and what you're going to be presenting to the panel. So as I mentioned at the top of the presentation, there have been some updated guidelines for conflict of interest specifically for site visitors. Things like former employment at a program, being a former graduate student or intern at the program, having a significant family or personal connection with the program, being a previous site visitor to the program on the program's immediately preceding site visit, any other conflict with another member of the team, a significant personal connection with somebody else on the site visit team, or any other significant conflicts identified by the site visitors or the programs. It's at this point that I want to note that the accreditation office, accreditation at CPA.ca or accreditation office at CPA.ca, are both resources that you can use if you're unsure about whether or not you are in conflict with a particular program. So we do have a guideline, a guide to the standards for site visitors handout that is available in the draft site visitor guidebook and the accreditation standards and procedures manuals. And I would strongly recommend that you review those. I will be providing links or copies of those documents along with the link to this webinar. So just making sure that you have reviewed those if you have not had a chance to. In terms of the site visit report, as I mentioned previously, the chair has ultimate responsibility for the report being submitted. And it's helpful sometimes to make sure that you agree with the team at the outset how the report is going to be written, which team members are going to be responsible for what section, reconfirming these plans at the end of the site visit, and if at all possible, even obtaining copies of each other's notes so that you can help each other draft your particular sections is all going to be helpful. So in terms of writing an effective site visit report, it's obviously really important to be well prepared. So reviewing your self-study, putting together relevant questions based on your notes from the self-study, based on notes from the panel reviewer, good delegation, good division of labor. These are all going to be very helpful. Broadly speaking, though, in terms of the content of the site visitor report, we really want to make sure that the site visitor report is focused on data. So it's focused on observations, information that you can use to back up those observations, as well as focusing really on the standards themselves and how programs are meeting those standards, or in some cases, maybe not meeting those standards. This is really tough because it's tempting to provide a lot of judgment when you're doing this kind of writing. But in this case, really focusing on the how and the what of what was observed, or, how particular procedures are being applied, or those kinds of things, is going to be a lot more helpful than providing blanket judgment statements. And obviously, when in doubt, cite your data sources, just like we do for everything else that we write in our discipline. If you have a citation, it's usually helpful. So I mentioned there are going to be some other important resources linked. The accreditation standards, including the quick reference guide, is obviously very helpful. The quick reference guide is located at the back of the standards manual, and it just has a brief outline of the standards with a second column for note-taking. I usually recommend that site visitors print off a couple of those and use one of them for note-taking during the self-study review and one of them for note-taking during the interviews and the actual site visit itself. There's obviously the accreditation procedures document, there's the site visitor guidebook, and there's the guide to the standards for site visitors, all of which are going to be sent along with the link to this presentation. Now, very quickly, I want to walk through some of the changes that are being made at this point because of virtual site visits being the norm because of COVID. COVID-19 has meant that in-person site visits have been put on hold and because travel is not very possible across the country right now, at least not in any sort of convenient way. And so we've made a couple of changes to the site visit procedure, and I want to just go over those quickly now. The first of which is obviously that because these site visits are virtual, all meetings in the site visits are going to be happening via Zoom. This means that in order to facilitate people being able to attend these meetings, we're restricting the timing of these meetings to between 12 and 5 Eastern time. Now, the accreditation office and the panel have come up with those times to ensure that people from different time zones can participate without having to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning or have to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night. With that said, should you be dealing with a site visit team as well as a program that are consolidated within a particular time zone, you have some flexibility there, provided the director of training and the site visit team chair can come to an agreement on that. All programs are also going to be asked to submit a virtual tour of their campus or their facilities along with their site visit documentation to make sure that we can get a sense of some of these some of these facilities or of like workspaces and lab spaces and library resources and so on without necessarily having set foot in the building themselves. So we're also allowing programs to extend their site visits up to a third day, so a third sort of 12 to 5 Eastern time block, to make sure that if there are interviews that need to happen, there's other follow-up that needs to happen, that the site visitors are not confined to those 2 days. Again, this is with the agreement of the director of training and the site visit team chair, and it's not necessary. The final part of the site visit, which is a little bit trickier, is going to be the documentation review. So student file reviews, work sample reviews, and so on. These are going to be organized by the programs themselves and may take a different shape depending on the program that you're visiting. And the reason for this is because the upload of student work samples and so on and so forth would have been considered to be basically sharing personal health information if they were uploaded to, for example, CPA servers. And so as a result, we had to make sure that the CPA did not inadvertently become custodians of personal health information and have to abide by the laws and standards governing that across all 13 jurisdictions in the country, and so that is being left to the program to coordinate with their privacy officers and make sure that they're adhering to their provincial and federal privacy statutes to make that sharing possible. So the final thing is, the final part of this presentation is really about using Zoom as a platform. Now, if you are already familiar with how to use Zoom and how to set up a meeting, please feel free to disconnect at this point. Thank you very much for your time. If you have not used Zoom before, the CPA Accreditation Office is going to be providing Zoom accounts to the site visit team chairs in order to set up their virtual meetings for the virtual site visits. And so I just wanted to walk through very briefly how to set up a Zoom meeting, and hopefully this will be helpful to you. So when you go into Zoom, the first thing that's going to ask you to do is in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to see a button that says log in. Or sign in. And so you're going to sign in with the credentials that have been provided to you by the CPA Accreditation Office. Once you've signed in, you're going to see a screen that looks something like this, and you can click on the My Account button, which will bring you to a screen where the top left-hand corner is going to look like this. At this point, you're going to click on Meetings, and then you're going to have a button that says Schedule a Meeting. So once you click on the Schedule a Meeting button, you should see a screen that looks something like this. So you're going to fill out the appropriate topic, meeting title, the date and time using the drop-down menus, and so on. And then once you've done that, you're going to scroll a little further down the page. And by default, Zoom ensures that host and participant video are off. You can click those both to on. And under audio, you can click on edit, and you can add Canada as a potential dial-in option for those people that may not have access to a webcam or a microphone, but that still want to participate in the meeting. In terms of the security settings, I would recommend using either a waiting room or a passcode. I don't think that both are necessary, but I will leave that up to individual chairs. The issue with using a waiting room is that you have to manually admit all of the participants of the meeting one at a time. So I would recommend simply going with the passcode, provided that the links for your meetings are not being shared far and wide. In terms of using Zoom, once you go down a little bit farther on your list, you'll notice that there's an option to mute participants upon entry. Once again, I would strongly recommend enabling that option, just to make sure that you're not dealing with a lot of extraneous microphone noise, even if people log in a couple of minutes late. And you can also assign other members of your site visit team as alternate hosts to your meeting just by using their regular email address. The primary host is going to be the person who has the email address svteam12345 or 6 at cpa.ca. And then once you're done with that, you click on Save, and that should save your meeting. You'll then be brought to a screen, and you'll notice that you have an option to copy your invitation. Once you've copied your invitation, once you click on that option, you'll see a screen that looks like this. It's a sort of an overlay on the previous screen that is going to allow you to basically select all of the information that's presented in this box, and copy and paste it into a calendar invite, an email, whatever. And finally, when you go back to the meetings screen, if you hover over the meeting that you've selected or the meeting that you've created, you should see a button there that says Start. And once you can edit the contents of the meeting, you can delete a meeting if you'd like. But in order to start the meeting, to get the ball rolling, you just hover over the meeting on that main screen and then you hit start. So that has been a very brief tutorial on how to use the Zoom meeting function. Within Zoom meetings themselves, you have the option to mute and unmute participants. You have the option to mute and unmute yourself. And I think those kinds of things are relatively self-explanatory, but if there are any concerns about that, once again, you're welcome to email us at accreditation@cpa.ca or accreditationoffice@cpa.ca, and we'll be happy to help you out. Thank you very much for participating or listening to my webinar, and hopefully this has been helpful to you.